Welcome to Garden-Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today it's time for another food forest tour. I live in Utah Zone 6/7 on a small urban property about a 1/4 acre, and I wanted to show you what I have been able to grow on this property and what they look like right now during the season. This is about the 3rd week in May. Sunday we have another near frost advisory. I think it's going to get down to 39 degrees. And that's just the way it happens in Utah. We've been in the 80s with nighttime temperatures in the 50s. We've had a lot of rain, and now we're going to go back to the possibility of freezing temperatures. They have a winter weather advisory in the mountains around here. So we get wild swings in weather, and I have to be conscientious of that when I plant my plants. Now, when I say Utah Zone 6/7, I've lived here for 15 years, and I've actually seen temperatures in the negatives. That's lower than Zone 7, and we've even, I think, flirted with a Zone 5. Now, when I first moved here, there was nobody who could convince me we were anything less than a Zone 5, and I didn't even dream of planting anything that was only hardy down to a Zone 7. But I have since changed. I'm not doing it flippantly. I know that if I plant plants that are only hardy to Zone 6s and 7s, there's a possibility I could lose them in a rogue winter. But there are things that I do to protect them, and there are things that I do when I hedge my bets, and I'll show you those, and we'll talk about them as we go tour my property. So right here we're on the south side of my property, and we have some edible plants here, some producing and some not. This first one right here is a very rare hardy pistachio. This is from a seedling that was from a tree that was planted in Logan, which is a very cold area in northern Utah. And it was planted by, I think it was Iranian students or Turkish students, but anyway, some students came to Utah State University and brought with them seeds of the pistachio trees in their area. They planted those seeds on a rocky hillside near campus, and those trees have thrived ever since, and that was in the 1970s. So this is a seedling from one of those trees. It's around 7 years old right now, I think, maybe 6. It's not old enough to flower. I do have another one in my backyard, and there are several other people in Utah who are growing the same tree. Now, what I'm hoping is that once I figure out whether or not this is a male or female, either I or somebody else will have the opposite, another male or female, so we can pollinate this tree. I think what I'd like to do is graft the pollinator on. If this is a male, that would be unfortunate. I would probably need to graft female, as many as possible, and leave just a single branch of the male. If we get lucky and this is a female, then we'd probably only need to graft a single male branch to it. So wish me luck, and let's all hope this is female, because that would make me so happy. I would love to have pistachios here in Utah. This does survive winters really well. We've had winters in the single digits, and it's gone without a hitch, without covering. This right here is, I think, a laced up elderberry, or it's a black tower. I can't remember which one it is. But this is about as big as they get. They're supposed to get around 10 feet tall and maybe 3 to 4 feet wide. And this one, it's not yet reached the 10 feet, but it's reached the 3 to 4 feet. And last year, it produced a couple of little berries. Now, they do need a pollinator. This is a Sambucus nigra, and it needs another type of Sambucus nigra to be able to pollinate it. But I have a couple of different ones, and I'm hoping to get more berries this year. So let's show you the buds. These are the flower buds, and they open up to be gorgeous flowers. This right here is a Chicago hardy fig. I pruned it heavily last August in thinking that I was going to cover it over the winter. But I decided to try and just leave it uncovered, and look what has happened. It did not die back. I only see one branch that died back. We'll probably have to remove this one, but that's okay, because look what we have. This is called an early Breba fig. Breba figs form on the old wood, and they will ripen early. The main crop of figs forms on the new wood, so this is going to start forming little main crop figs, and those ripen later in the season. If we have too early a frost in the fall, then sometimes we do not see these main crop figs ripen. So Chicago hardy, from what I've heard, especially as they get older and have older branches, they can tolerate cold winters sooner. Now, I have seen total dieback of branches when the temperatures hit 20 degrees, but when that happens with especially hardy branches like Chicago hardy, they do come back from the roots. You can see this one is starting to grow from the roots. This is how I cover my figs that are a little less hardy. I do 2 levels. First one is this insulation, and I keep that away from the tree with some stakes so that the tree has room to breathe. I do tie the fig tree together a little bit, and then I put chicken wire around another set of stakes and stuff that full of straw. And then I cover the entire thing in greenhouse plastic. There's the plastic right down there. Now I do end up leaving these on until late May because, like I said, in a couple of days we're going to get freezing temperatures again. I don't know if this will tolerate the freezing temperatures because this is a black mission fig, which is not counted as a hardy fig. So this covering may come off next week, but let me show you other figs where I'm going to take the covering off a little bit earlier. Now this is another experiment. This is a black mission fig. I'm assuming it's a black mission fig. It was a cutting from a friend whose family had grown it for decades in Utah, in Salt Lake, Utah, without covering it. And this one is about 3 years old, maybe 4. So I figure next year I'm not going to cover it. This year I forwent the straw and just covered it with the insulation and greenhouse plastic. This one is also leafing out, and I'm going to be removing the rest of the covering today. Now I love growing edible foods as ornamentals. So I'd say about 40%, maybe a little bit more of this landscape is edible. It's a little difficult to tell, but let's go over those plants and show you which are edible. One thing that I love to grow are strawberries as landscape plants. They have gorgeous fall color. They produce a ton of berries. You can see some starting to ripen down here. This one's a little malformed, but we have other berries. That are starting to form. I share these with the neighborhood kids, but I have enough for the neighborhood kids and enough for a ton of jam. But strawberries are not water efficient. I count my entire property as water efficient, but these I have to go through with a hose 3 times a week and water them to keep them happy. It also helps that they're at the bottom of this hill, so any water that collects down here. This right here is another rare tree in Utah. This is a Davis pawpaw, and you can see some branches. We've got some more dieback on this tree. It really, really makes me sad. This tree flourished and did amazing when this area through here was all grass. They need a lot of water and they need a good mulch over them. So when I switched this out to a water efficient landscape, it started to suffer. So this is another one that I hand water deeply once a week. I'll take a little sprinkler head and put this on this area once a week and water them deeply. But even though it's in less than ideal conditions, and it's a single tree when these are supposed to not be self-pollinating. This is a Davis, which is partially self-fruitful, and I get fruit on it every single year and have for the last 8 years. So we've got several. This is what the flowers look like right here. Hopefully you can see that. The light is making it so I can't see through my cell phone viewer, through my cell phone, but this is what the flowers look like. Now you can increase the amount of fruit you get on these by taking the older flowers and using them to pollinate the younger flowers. I did not do that this year, but I did seem to get quite a bit of fruit on this. We'll see how it lasts. The wind sometimes will blow these off because these are larger fruit. This is another variety. This is a 5-year-old sunflower pawpaw. It's a later flowering variety. And we've got one last little flower on here. You can see what it looks like when the pollen is formed inside. But there's nothing left to pull that off and pollinate with, so we are just going to leave it. I don't know if we're going to get any fruit off this tree this year. We had several other flowers and they did not get pollinated, so we'll see how it goes. Now this is my exercise in futility. This is the 7th tree in this location. This is another pawpaw. I am bound and determined to have a pawpaw on this spot, even though it's failed 7 times. But this one looks pretty healthy. This is a little brand new mango pawpaw that I planted this spring. I waited until it was no longer dormant when it was leafing out to plant it, and it seems to be doing well. So we're going to watch this really carefully and see if we can get a third pawpaw tree out front. We've got an almond here. This is only a 3-year-old almond, and we have tons of almonds on it. Almost every branch has that many almonds. We had 2 of them last year in its 2nd year, and they were delicious. This one's a Bounty almond. This one's a Bounty almond, and the reason I chose a Bounty is because it is late flowering, early ripening, and hardy. Now, regular almond trees in our area don't do as well because late spring frosts sometimes wipe out all the flowers. That's why I chose a late flowering variety. And they also do need pollinators. Let me show you the pollinator for this one. This is the pollinator. It's a Nikita's Pride. I had to replant this one because the first one I planted never leafed out. So you can see in its 2nd year, we are getting almonds on it, and I got 1 almond off it in its 1st year. So almonds seem to produce really young. Hopefully it catches up with the 3-year-old one over there shortly. Now in my food forest, I do have a ton of herbs, and then I have annual fruiting plants that grow in here that we're not going to cover, but just know that we have those. And then we have these other 2 trees. This one is a hazelnut, which grows beautifully in the state of Utah, very cold tolerant, but this one's only 3 years old. It did get catkins on it for the first time this year. Did not fruit, which that's okay because it's still young. And these tend to try and grow as a bush, but I'm going to see if I can keep the suckers pruned from the base and let it grow as a tree. This right here is a hardy pomegranate. This one's a Slovatsky, Russian hardy pomegranate. I got my first fruit off of it last year, and it was delicious. Now the hardy pomegranates, the first few years you do have to protect them over the winter, and I just covered them with burlap. But after that, I think they said after 3 years, these are hardy enough that you do not need to cover them. And I did not cover this year, and it is doing beautifully. And let me show you the first flower that the first flower bud that I just think I'm seeing through the leaves here. Let's go see if that is actually a flower bud. And it is a flower bud. We have my first flower bud here in May. So we'll see if we get fruit on it this year. I'm pretty sure we will. Now I forgot to give you the variety of hazelnut this is, but this is a Doris. Supposedly a very heavy producing, really delicious nut. And this is its pollinator over here. This is a Lincoln. This one is in a little bit more shade, so it's not as big. But we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna prune both of these, so take all of the suckers that are growing at the base out and grow them as a single trunk tree. This right here is my Juliet bush cherry. It flowered beautifully this spring, but because of the lack of a pollinator flowering, they're aborting a lot of the little cherries. They do need a pollinator, and I have one, it just hasn't flowered yet. Let's show you the one cherry that I seem to have. This is what the cherries look like. So these I think will ripen. This over here is a Carmine Jewel, and it's the pollinator for the Juliet. It was buried 2 feet down when the utilities came and dug it up one year. I found it the next spring digging a hole for another plant. So I had to dig that out of the ground and replant it. And even though it was buried for the winter, it came back, but it seems to be pretty stunted. But it's looking good this year, so I'm hoping it'll flower next year and we'll get more bush cherries because they make the most delicious jelly ever. I made some from my Juliet bush cherry last year. These right here are honeyberries, and I'll link a video above. I just did a video on the honeyberries, so I'm not going to cover those very much. These get a little bit of afternoon shade, and I do have to hand water these because they need a little bit more water than the rest of the plants, and they're doing pretty well. Now, as opposed to my front yard, my backyard is mostly edibles. Let's go over the edibles that I have back here, and there's a ton of them. A lot of rare fruits, a lot of normal fruits, and we've got some that are already fruiting. The honeyberries are the ones that are fruiting, and the birds pretty much eaten all of those, so I don't have any left to show you. But like I said, I linked the video above, and that will show you what one of the fruits that I found looks like. This one is a new one right here. I used to have a golden currant, but what I had really wanted was a clove currant. So I dug out the golden currant, which didn't like this area very well. It grew huge and it did produce fruit, but it got way too lanky. We're going to see if the clove currant is a little bit more contained. This is its very first year, and we already have fruit on it, and the flowers smelled heavenly. This is a jostaberry. This is its third year. It flowered heavily, and I thought it was going to fruit heavily, but we only got a few fruits down at the bottom. So these are forming. I got a few of them last year, and they were delicious. But what's happening with most of the flowers, these are old flowers, and they're just falling off without forming fruit. So maybe next year will be better, because this is still kind of a young plant. My pink champagne currant, on the other hand, is producing prolifically. Now this is another one where the jelly was absolutely delicious, so I'm excited to have these. Right next to it is a little younger Primus white currant. Now we're going to see how these, we're going to see if we like the flavor of these currants this year. Because last year they tasted a lot like gasoline, and I didn't really like them. But from what I've heard, first year plants that bear fruit in their first year, that fruit is not representative of what it's actually going to taste like. So we're going to give it another year and see if I like the Primus white currant flavor. On the back of my house, just about everything here is edible. This really tall one is a 16-year-old jujube that bears fruit prolifically. It's finally leafed out. It leaves out very late in the year, which is nice because it misses most of the late frosts. And by the time it leaves out like this, it can take like the one frost we're going to have on Sunday. But it fruits beautifully, tastes delicious, and I absolutely love it. They grow really easily in Utah. These are service berries. These are Regent service berries that are a lot larger than they ever said they would be, but they also fruit prolifically. Last year there was a ton of fruit on them. This year there seems to be less, but we're still getting a lot of fruit. I love to make jellies out of those. This is an Invictus gooseberry. It's a new plant. It struggled at first. I don't know if it's forming any fruit this year. This is its second year. First year it didn't grow very well. I am not seeing any fruit. It did flower a little bit, so maybe next year we'll get fruit on it. The fruit on this is large and green and very, very sweet. This one right here was supposed to be an Invictus gooseberry, but it turned out to be something else, and I'm not sure what it is. They turn pink instead of green, and it does fruit prolifically, but the flavor is pretty benign. There's not a ton of flavor on it, so it's not my favorite. But it's going to stay because it's growing, and it's a gooseberry, and it just does well in this area. This is another Regent service berry, and it serves as a trellis for my passion vine. Let's show you what kind of passion vines grow in Utah. Now this is my passion vine, and yes, there is very little to nothing there right now, but this is how they act. This is the third week in March, and we are just barely starting to see new growth. That is part of my passion vine. There will be more popping up here shortly. You can see a really tiny little growth bed there. But by the time we hit July, it will be tall enough to hit the roof of my house. These grow very prolifically here. So this is a maypop, or Passiflora inermis, not Passiflora edulis. Passiflora edulis is not hardy for this area. Passiflora inermis is hardy for this area without needing to be covered. The only issue with it is it may or may not have time to be harvested at the end of the year, because sometimes we get really early spring frosts in mid-September. If that happens, you won't have time for the fruit to ripen, but you still get the gorgeous flowers. The leaves and the flowers are both edible and medicinal, so it doesn't really matter if the fruit doesn't ripen. Last year it ripened, and it was pretty good. Now I count this lower area as the bulk of my food forest. We've got a ton of trees in here. I like to plant them closely together using the Grow a Little Fruit Tree method and the Dave Wilson backyard orcharding method. So we've got 2 apples and a pear in this clump right here. It's a Bradford pear, a early Fuji or a September Wonder Fuji and a Jonah Gold in the back. The apple trees are very strongly alternate bearers. That means one year they'll produce fruit and the next year they won't produce any. And this is the year where they're not really producing. So we're not going to get too many apples, but the pear produces a ton of fruit every year. And we've got a ton of little baby fruits on it. So let's show you those. Now, unlike my apples, I do not thin out my pears, but we've got a ton of pears in here. They seem to self-thin. This is where I planted my Jerusalem artichokes. I dug this entire container out trying to contain them because they, even though it's 17 inches tall and I buried it 2 inches down, we've got a ton of Jerusalem artichokes that are self-sowing themselves everywhere. I think these are roots that escaped to the bottom. So I have pulled out all stops. I've brought out some glyphosate and I've been spraying these with glyphosate. Like I said, I dug this out last year. I dug this out earlier this spring, put down weed mat and then refilled it. And this is what came up, you know, from the Jerusalem artichokes that were left in the soil that I put back in there. So none of these are connected to any of these. Glyphosate does not travel through the soil or the air. So glyphosate, I think, is going to be the safest way to poison these because these will pop up in my other beds. And I want to avoid that as much as possible. We've got tons of herbs as ground cover, including strawberries. And then we've got more fig trees. All of these covers have got to come off today. This one right here is starting to leaf out, but I think it's just gotten too hot in here or something, or maybe it's late leafer. It's not leafed out as early as the ones in the front yard, and we may have lost some branches. But I do see green growth down at the base, so not all is lost. This one is a Negron. This one is actually starting to leaf out, and this one is a Marseilles Black VS. This one right here is a Ronde Bordeaux. I thought I saw figs already forming on this. Let's see. Maybe we don't have any Brabo crops on this one, but we will definitely get the main crop on it. This right here I think is going to turn out to be my very, very favorite fig. This one is an Italian honey fig or Latarula fig, and it gave me some gorgeous giant figs last year, and it survived the winter beautifully. This is an Olympian. It did not form fruit last year. I'm hoping to see fruit this year. So that's 8 varieties of figs that I have back here. We also have a Scarlet Sentinel and North Pole columnar apple. Columnar apples do exactly what it says. They grow in a column and they are not very wide at all. I planted them in the Dave Wilson backyard orcharding method where I put them in the same hole. And we're going to have to come through and thin these out. The North Pole produced heavily this year again. The Scarlet Sentinel did not produce any that I know of. But the Scarlet Sentinel produced beautifully last year and they were delicious. This is another hardy pomegranate. It's a Kazake hardy pomegranate. I'm not seeing, oh, never mind. Look at this. We've got our first flower on it. So we'll probably see fruit on this one again. We saw fruit off of this one last year. I'm really excited because it was also delicious. I did cover this one like I did with my figs, minus the straw. This one is a Parfienka pomegranate. It's its second year. It has not had time to produce fruit yet, but I'm hoping it does this year. Not seeing any flowers on it yet. And this is probably one I'll have to keep pruned small and cover every year because it's not as hardy as the other ones. The other thing I've heard about these is there's a possibility that they don't ripen their fruit early enough before we get our fall frosts. This right here is my very little 3-year-old Ichike Kaijiro plum. Ichike Kaijiro persimmon. I dug it up this spring because last year we hardly got any growth on it and I was worried that the roots were tangled up. So I dug it up this spring and looked at the roots, and they seemed okay. I'm not sure why there was very little growth, but we're just going to see if we get more growth off it this year. It's starting out well, but it also started out well last year. So we'll see what happens. This one, however, is my Cassandra grafted persimmon that a friend gave to me 3 years ago. And look what we've got on here. We've got flowers. We'll see if it actually produces fruit this year. Ah, that broke. That makes me sad. So all of this fruit, possible fruit, I broke it. That makes me sad. But there are other branches forming fruit. So we'll see if we get fruit this year. I am really excited. It's looking very healthy, getting a lot of good growth. So I think we're going to have a great persimmon tree. Now persimmons are self-pollinating, so I don't need to worry about a pollinator for it. Now on the floor of my food forest, we've carpeted it with strawberries. I just let the strawberries go and produce, and they end up being a mulch. One thing that has not done well, but still persists on coming back, are my Arctic raspberries. Arctic raspberries are hard enough for here, but I think they need a more acidic soil, and I think they need pollinators. This one, I planted 4 varieties, but I think only 1 variety has actually survived. And so when we get these beautiful little pink flowers, no fruit seems to form. We have many different kinds of thyme. We have a lot of different kinds of yarrow. We have garden sage and a hyssop, all of which are edible. And then we have our gomi berries. This gomi berry is a red gem or sweet scar. I think this is a red gem, and it struggled for the first year, but I think this year it's going to have a lot more growth. It did not get any flowers, so we're not going to see any fruit off this one. But if we get lucky, we'll get 1 or 2 fruit off this one. This is the sweet scarlet. It was planted the same time as the red gem. It's just thrived. Produced flowers heavily. The flowers were gorgeous, but most of the flowers fell off. Let me see if I can find the 1 or 2 fruits that it produced. This is a fruit. So barring it falling off or the birds eating it, we might get to taste what gomi berries taste like this year. So I think there's 3 of them that look like that. I did have a Girardi dwarf mulberry here. It just didn't make it through the winter, and I think I want to find another one and plant it here because those sound amazing. These are my blackberries. These blackberries are thornless. They're triple crown. And we've got a lot of fruit starting to form on these. Well, let's say buds. It's not fruit yet, but these will absolutely become fruit. Our grapes are coming along. It's a little early in the season, but as usual, we're going to have a lot of grapes. I prune them in the forearm knifing method, and I'll link a video up on how I prune my grapes. They did get pruned, but this one right here is the himrod, and it's getting pretty sparse. It's probably going to be time to replace some of these canes. What I do is I just saw them off at the base and hopefully grow another cane that's long enough and vigorous enough to replace it. We've got all my garden beds that are planted out with their spring veggies and alliums. We've got raspberries. I think these are autumn Britain. And I finally learned what was wrong with my raspberries is they needed heavy fertilizer and heavy watering. These I hand water 3 times a week. I had them hooked to a system, to a zone where they were only getting water once a week, and once a week was not enough, and they almost died. They need water 3 times a week, and they seem to do well with that. But we're going to get a ton of berries this year. Now this right here is my Concord grape. We're getting a lot of flowers on it. We'll get a lot of fruit, but these tend to go, the Concord grapes in my area for some reason tend to go pretty iron deficient. Most years I get an iron chelate down early in the spring, and I didn't this year. So I'm gonna need to get that down so we can avoid the really bad dead leaves that I get when I forget it. This right here is a Swenson Red, my best flavored grape, hardiest, most prolific, but it is seeded, but it makes the best jelly and the best jams possible. Okay, this is not good. This is showing me that we had a neighbor come through on their property up to a quarter mile away that put down 2,4-D when it was too hot. I don't use 2,4-D. This is absolutely what herbicide damage looks like on a plant, especially grapes. Grapes are very susceptible to it, and you can get herbicide damage from drift in certain areas like this. Like the rest of the vine looks great, but this is where the herbicide settled on these branches right here. So herbicide damage on these. You can tell because they are starting to curl in weird ways and slow their growth. So hopefully it didn't damage any of my other grapes. This right here is a Cannabis. We're going to get a lot of flowers. I'm not seeing herbicide damage on this one. This is my least vigorous grower, but has excellent flavored fruit. It produces a ton of fruit, but not a lot of growth. This right here is very sad. These were my two peaches and a nectarine, and we had to remove them because they had Cytospora, which is a deadly growth, and which is a deadly bacterial disease that has no cure, and we didn't want it traveling to my cherry tree right here. So we had to remove these, and I probably won't be able to plant peach trees or nectarine trees here again. What I need to do is dig out these stumps and figure out what to put here. And I have no idea if it's going to be another garden bed or another fruit tree. We'll have to make some decisions on that. Underneath it, I did have garlic planted to stop the borers, and it worked pretty well. These trees did last almost 16 years. No, I take that back. These were 17 years old, which for Utah is an old peach tree. So it worked pretty well. This last grapevine is my Jupiter grapes. They have kind of a muscadine flavor, kind of musky. They're a gorgeous dark grape. And I use these in juices. I like to mix this variety with my other varieties to give added color and a depth of flavor. And it looks like this branch is going to need to be replaced here shortly too. We'll see if we can get some good growth good enough to replace it. We've got my heavily producing Stella cherry. This is on standard rootstock. I have just pruned it to stay around 12 feet tall. Right now it takes an arborist to get up there to prune it for me because I can't prune it myself when it's this tall. We get a ton of fruit, way more than enough for me and at least 5 other families. So I always share these. They are delicious. Down here is my experiment with the hardy pistachio. This is another hardy pistachio. You can see the difference in size between this one and the one I was growing in the front. This one gets very little water and no fertilizer. The other one is next to my neighbor's lawn and it gets a lot of water. So I think they survive without water. They're surviving at Utah State without water, but they prefer to have water, at least in their younger years. So we'll hopefully have one male and one female, and then we can graft onto each other and get a ton of pistachios. That would be great. This is another Chicago hardy fig that I planted 17 years ago. It's tiny. It used to die to the ground every year and grow a foot tall and not produce any fruit. But last year it produced its first fruit, and last year and this year are the first years they did not die back over the winter. So our winters are getting a little warmer. The stems on these are a little hardier, and we're going to get some brave fruit off of these too. At least one. Yeah. Oh, there's some more back here. So a couple of brave fruit and hopefully some main crop fruit. This right here is another Sambucus nigra. This one I think is a Jonade Serenade. It's a elderberry, and last year it struggled. It doesn't get a ton of water in this area, no fertilizer. I don't think they really need it, but it took a while to get established, and I think we're finally going to get some good growth off of it this year. It did flower earlier, but not in enough time but not at the right time to pollinate the other elderberries that I have. So we'll see if we get any fruit on those other elderberries. This right here is a plum. This is my Santa Rosa plum. Sometimes we get fruit, sometimes we don't. It just depends on how late the frosts were and if they coincide with the flowering on this tree. But this year we are getting fruit, and it makes me very happy because this is some of the best plums ever. Now, last of all, we're going to show you my pluots. We have a Flavor King and a Flavor Supreme, planted in the Dave Wilson backyard orcharding method, where you put 2 trees or 3 trees or 4 trees in a hole. These produced a few fruit last year. They're only about 4 years old. This year, I think we're going to get 1 or 2 fruits off of each one. They didn't flower very well this year, but the fruit that I got off them last year was absolutely delicious, and we have 1 more. This little pluot is being taken over by the blue spruce. These blue spruce are baby blue eyes, and they were only supposed to get 10 feet wide, but now they're getting close to 20 feet wide. And this is the year I think they're going to touch in the center. So this little guy is competing with their roots and competes with the shade in the afternoon, but it does produce 1 or 2 fruits for me each year, and that's it, 1 or 2. I don't see any this year. It would be nice if we got some. So what I may need to do is graft one of these branches onto one of the other pluot trees and see if we can get more fruit. Now, another thing I have on the food florist floor is my sea kale. Now, this is entirely edible. The flower shoots are edible, the leaves are edible. It's completely hardy, comes back year after year, and I absolutely love it. So sea kale is a great thing to have on your food florist floors. And I almost forgot my comfrey. I was not going to plant comfrey, but somebody gave me a little root. It's taken a few years to take hold, but we do have comfrey, because what is a food forest without comfrey? So that's the update on my food forest and what's growing, and a sneak peek on the fruit that I'm going to have this year. Now, I will definitely do more tours as the fruit ripens, show you what I get. And I've thought for many years about showing videos on how I preserve all this fruit. But my kitchen is not set up for videos, and it's a really old kitchen, and I'm afraid of judgment. But anyway, I do preserve a lot of this fruit. Matter of fact, I'm still eating fruit from last year. I dehydrate it, I make jams and jellies. I do a lot of different things with it. But anyway, I would love to hear what you're growing on your properties. Do you have an urban food forest? Where do you live, and what is growing in it? So hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.